You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am back temporarily from a brief little vacation, though hopefully the content flowed well enough as scheduled that you didn't really notice, other than not really being able to get a hold of me as you normally can. But that's not the biggest deal in the world. I'm catching up on all of that today as this episode drops, okay? So if you've been trying to get a hold of me, I'm getting to it. Okay. I just needed a little break. Just had to go see the boys in My Chemical Romance do their thing. I'm sure you'll hear me blabbering about that show on the internet a lot over the next coming weeks because it was the most amazing concert I've seen in a very long time, possibly ever. Anyway, more on that a different time. Today, I'm talking to my new buddy, Rich Renken. Rich has been in the MI industry for a very long time. I met him at NAMM and we had a great conversation, and I kind of immediately knew I needed to talk to this dude on the podcast because he's got some history, and I thought it would be a great conversation. And guess what? I was right. Rich is a great dude. We had a fantastic chat about his role currently at James Tyler Guitars and how he got there. We talk about the company itself. We talk about a lot of different things. I think you are going to find this interesting. If you've never worked in MI, this will be a nice peek behind the curtain, give you a little insight into the behind the scenes. A lot of people think this industry is much bigger than it is. And I think this conversation with Rich will demonstrate that it's not. It's very much not. But it's wonderful. It's fantastic. And I'm glad to be in it. And I'm glad that you're here. So let's get into this episode with Mr. Rich Renken. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff occasionally. Sometimes I'm your host, Blake Weiland. With me today, I have Rich Renken from James Tyler Guitars. What's going on?
What's happening?
I'm excited to do this because we met at NAMM and hung out at where were we? I don't even remember. The hotel or something, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, I ran into you because it wasn't at the booth. I remember that.
Yeah. I didn't really escape my booth all that much, so it definitely wasn't the booth. But we had a good chat, and I logged it in my brain. I was like, man, I got to talk to that guy on the podcast at some point because, man, you've been in the industry a long time.
Yeah.
You've worked for some of the biggest companies in the industry. You've done a lot of different things, and you're here at one of the. I don't think it's an understatement to say like one of the more legendary electric guitar builders in the industry. I want to know your story. Like, how did you get started playing, and what led you into this weird MI world, and how'd you get to James Tyler?
Oh gosh, feel free to edit this. You know.
Oh, I don't.
All right. Well, it all started when my earliest memories are pulling myself as close as I could get to my mom's dash because there was a 6x9 speaker in the dash. And I knew if I pulled my face closer, it sounded better or something,
bassier.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, is obviously where I'm putting it together, why I would do that. At the time I was just doing that. And I grew up in Minneapolis, and when my parents were divorced, I grew up in Northwest Iowa, and my uncle had a bunch of 45s, and a few of my dads were in there, like Chicago and Creedence Clearwater Revival and stuff. But there was a song, We're an American Band by Grand Funk Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a great drum intro and just a great groove. And I was probably 8 years old. So I wasn't, ooh, what a great drum intro. There was just something that drew me to it, and I wanted to play drums. Signed up for drums in 4th grade. Too many kids signed up for drums, so I had to take trumpet, and then hated that, so I switched to clarinet because of Benny Goodman. My dad was big into big band, and got made fun of for 3 years mercilessly, and switched to French horn in high school because they needed a French horn player, which is funny because I hated trumpet, but somehow I liked French horn. But at that point, and I had learned some drums in junior high from a guy who ultimately ended up becoming my drummer in first band I was in South Dakota. But we'll get to that in a second. So I went to high school, and a song by Brothers Johnson came on the radio called Stomp. And it was a R&B song, but it was a crossover pop hit. And the bass gave me the same feeling as that We're an American Band did. So I was like, you know what? There's a bass in the band room. I should play bass. So I started messing around with bass, and I had a guy in high school I went to high school with. He was 2 years ahead of me, and his name was Cleland Noe, and he was actually an upright pro cat. And he ended up in a Philharmonic in the Midwest. I can't remember if it was Chicago or where. And we're still friends to this day. But he showed me like Another One Bites the Dust. I think I just the riff, just the, not the whole song. I just was messing around. I learned You Dropped a Bomb on Me by Gap Band, and Owner of a Lonely Heart riff. Not the whole song, just the dome, 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 dome. And I was fascinated. So when I went to college, I bought a bass. I financed my first bass, bought a Hondo Alien from Sioux Falls Music, and from a guy named Steve Cooper. And because I owned a bass and I knew these other guys that were Christians, they were like, hey, you own a bass? Yeah, you're in the band.
You're like, okay.
What if I can't play? We don't care. You own a bass, so you're in the band.
Yep.
Because most guys had guitars or keyboards or whatnot. Well, that band, it was a total accident that it went together. But we ultimately, like I said, the drummer from junior high was in that band, and he was in the McDonald's All-American Band when we were in high school, and he was a straight A student. So he went back to med school when we all moved here. He almost moved here. He would have definitely been a session guy. But his name was Kyle Kager, and he's the chief medical officer for Optum now under United Healthcare. And my doctor. And every once in a while, he talks about it, and maybe we'll get him playing drums again one day. But I moved out here to go to Dick Grove School of Music, and the whole rest of the band kind of trickled out, and we all came out here. And my best friend, who's the other one of the guitar players in the band, his name is Brian Karlstrom, and he ultimately became Dave Jordan's engineer and did Alice in Chains' Dirt and Offspring and Social Distortion, all those 90s records. And that's part of my story, because I don't remember if I told you this when we were hanging, but I'm in the recording academy. I'm a mix engineer as well as doing what I've done on the industry side. And I could do either, and I love both. So I was going to Grove, and there was a ad in BAM magazine, which is called Bay Area Music, way back in the olden days. I can't believe I talk about stuff like it's the olden days.
Hey, I do it too. So I'm sitting here going like, well, yeah, that was over a decade. Oh,
wait a minute. 30 years ago. I was just showing a guy today, picked up his guitar, and I was showing him my old band. I put up a video on my YouTube of a song called Why Can't You Be Happy? I was in a band called Peace Child, and it had my, probably the first Vomit bass. Well, for sure the first Vomit bass, Tyler, which we'll get to in a second. But I thought, that's like 10 years, 33 years ago. Never mind.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
So Jim would advertise as the place for bass. And we should tell Jim's story too, because it's fascinating. And now that he's no longer with us, I feel very comfortable sharing it, because he would always just be embarrassed, because he never was about that,
Mm-hmm.
So he would advertise as a place for bass, because he sold bass gear, because so many of the guys in the Valley at that point, like Valley Arts and Spitzer Music and places that did repairs, ABK Rocks, they all sold guitar gear.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, I'm going to sell bass gear. This is before there was a bass center in town. So I went over there, the place for bass, didn't know who he was, didn't know his history, looked at the Tobias, and I looked at the Ken Smith and the Factor bass and the Status bass. And then I saw his bass, didn't know who I was standing next to. And I said, ooh, that's pretty awful. Who made that? So I made fun of his headstock to his face. And so when people go, man, I'm just not sure about the headstock, I totally get it. I can't see it now, obviously. I love it, with no qualms, obviously. So I bought a bass from him. I bought a Kubicki Factor from him, and didn't realize how much Kubicki was part of Jim's history. And then we just became friends. And one day I went into his shop, and I was thinking about going LAPD, because I was working as an armed security guard. And I thought, man, if I'm going to go on real calls, I should,
Get real money.
Yeah, get real money and have backup, really, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into his shop, and he's sitting there, and I'm like, what's up? And he goes, oh, I just can't keep anybody working for me. Guys that, that type of job, they come and go. And I'm like, I'll work for you. And so I worked for him for 7 years. Well, he went full-time building at that point, and we'll tell his story in a moment. But I didn't even realize that he had gone full-time building. I didn't even know what that meant. He just was like, hey, I'm moving to my garage. We're just going to build guitars. And then we kept doing repairs for Landau, and I think Paul Jackson Jr. and, of course, Dean Parks and different guys. And it was him and me in his garage. And then we ultimately ended up on Sepulveda. But if there wasn't enough work, and then it just kind of became part of my job, was doing the books, accounts payable and receivable, and helping out and doing year ending with old ledgers before computers. It was all on paper. And so I worked for him, and then I just needed something more steady. I loved working for him, but it was always sort of like, get the 7 guitars out so we could get paid. And I had a growing family at that point. I had 2 kids. So I went to work for Fernandez Guitars. Mm-hmm. And I was working there as a setup guy, and our accounts payable lady left. So I'm like, hey, I can do that job. And long story short, there at Fernandez, I met a lot of cats because of the sustainer, like Adrian Blue, who I still know, and a couple other guys that are good friends, like Matt Scannell from Vertical Horizon, who's also a Tyler player. So I met a lot of great people, and of course, the people I worked with, Rob Timmons is Arcane Pickups now. Eric Leonard runs a business in Des Moines, like big real estate and all that kind of stuff. So it was a really great time. And but long story short, I worked up to being the controller. So accounts payable, receivable, payroll, human resources, all this stuff. They couldn't afford me anymore, so they let me go. And at that point, I had been engineering records with my guitar player, Bobby Hartree. We were in a couple different bands together, and people started asking us after hearing our demos, hey, can you work on our stuff? And so we got busier and busier. So when I got the layoff letter, I was like, man, I know what I'm going to do.
Right.
And so I was doing that for about a year. And at that point in time, I was playing in a paid church gig. And the players were this Bobby Hartree I talk about all the time. He plays for a guy named Brenton Brown now. But the band was us 2 and Chris Pooley, who's like now the American Idol musical director. He's doing, I think, Sabrina Carpenter right now. He did Katy Perry's musical director. Killer keyboard player. He was in many bands like Jane's Addiction and all that kind of stuff. And then the drummer was Aaron Sterling, who you've probably heard of being out there in Nashville, who's taken over the town.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a blast. So, well, we would hire those guys to play on records. And at one point, Chris wasn't available, and I hired a guy named Daryl Smith. He worked for Line 6, and I met him, and he was a keyboard player, and I heard his band stuff, and I thought, yeah, he could probably do this. We were doing this sort of pop girl pop record, and he came down, killed it. And I said, hey, I'm doing this gig at this church in Malibu, and they already have a Hammond organ and a Leslie on stage. You could just come and play. The drummer played with Eric Johnson and Billy White and Ian Moore. And he was like, I've gotten to play with so many great drummers, but he and a guy named Rob Steitler, who's out there in Nashville, plays for Gatlin Brothers now, are probably my favorites. It's hard to say, man, I've played with so many, but he was just my Bonham to my John Paul Jones, and it was just that blast. So I said, hey, you should come out and play. And he said, sure. This Daryl Smith. And he sees me with my jazz bass into a vintage tube screamer. Oh, first off, into a really nice compressor, a half rack compressor on my pedal board.
Yeah. Oh, you had it on your pedal board?
Yeah, because in the 90s, it was hard to find a good bass compressor. Like guitar compressors, it didn't do what an LA2A. Now there's some good, bass compressor pedals, but there wasn't back then. And my best friend who I was talking about, Brian Karlstrom, I called him, and I didn't want to put a whole distressor on my pedal board, or because I had a JBL Yuri in my rack when I had an SVT rack, but at this point I'd gone to a pedal board, and he's like, dude, get the RNC. It was a really nice compressor. It has the qualities of a distressor, and you could put it on your pedal board. I put pedals on top of it. Dave Phillips did my last one from LA Sound Design, but so into the compressor, into the tube screamer, into a EBS Octaver, into a Qtron envelope filter, into a Sansamp bass driver DI, into a 73 SVT stack at church.
Nice.
Back when amps were still allowed. But so we did the set, and in between sets, he's like, do you need a job? And I'm like, not really. And he's like, well, because we're hiring at Line 6 and we're hiring a product manager. I had no idea what that was. And he said, well, just come over and grab lunch and check it out. Check out the place. So I went over and met everybody. And I was just like, then I wanted the job, which bummed me out because, when you're just kind of seeing what's what, but then I was like, these guys are great. Like I met Marcus Ryle, the founder, and a couple other guys, and George Trips of Way Huge Electronics, Dunlop, he was there at that time. And I knew George before that when he was just doing Way Huge, and a couple other guys that I knew. And I was just like, man, now I want to work here. And he's like, well, do a report on what you would do with a bass amp. I was under NDA at this point, so I knew they wanted to do a bass amp. And I'm like, okay, so I did this whole report. And he writes back and he goes, man, everybody thinks you'd be perfect for the product, but do you have any financial experience?
Oh.
I was the controller at Line 6 because Jim would make me help him with his books.
Right.
Had I had an attitude and said, I signed up to work on guitars, I'm not going to do your accounting, no, I wouldn't have learned all this stuff. So I ended up at Line 6, like I told you, and there to do the low-down bass amp. But then my next project was Spider 3 with all the artist presets, which I improved the amp with sound design guy named Jess Slingloff. And it was so popular, we became number one in amps for the first time, and over Fender. And it was such a hit. We were 33% of the under 500 market. So I had a whole long conversation with Marcus about tubes, and he said it was religion. And I said, I don't think so. I think there's still something there. This, of course, now we've come so far. Literally what Marcus and I were talking about, and I was saying, I disagree. I think in maybe 10 or 15 years, we might have the computer power to really make it where somebody could use something like the Helix Stadium live. Mm-hmm. And I was on the team that, started the talks about Helix. That it wasn't called Helix. It was, I think our code name was HD1000 or something, just as an internal code name or something like that. But I was telling him, I said, Marcus, it's not religion. There is something there. And so I divided these pies and I said, look, we're 33% of this pie, but we're only 4% of this pie. And basically the 500 and over was tube amps and then flex tone. And under was all solid state amps. And I said, Marcus, this is religion? And he goes, yeah, I think so. And I said, look, I'm a church going guy. So these are Catholics and these are Baptists. And no matter how much you dress it up, they're not going to be comfortable in each other's church either way. And he didn't even say anything else. He just looked at me and goes, okay, we're doing it, but we're not going to slap a 12AX7 in something and call it a tube amp. It has to be a tube amp. And so we did the spider valve with Bogner. And whenever I say I really mean me and Daryl Smith, who hired me. We were kind of like partners in crime. And he was my boss, but he won't let me call him my boss. But it was always him and me, like, So we did that. I was over at Tim Pierce's. He helped me make Spider 3 sound better. And Tim Pierce had all 4 of the modelers, the DL4, the delay pedal green one, and the blue one and the purple one and the gold one on a pedal board. And it was taking up like half of this massive pedal board. And I thought, why aren't those all in one thing? And Daryl and I started talking, and that's what birthed M13, which became M9, which is still on pedal boards like Bukovac and out there and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then M5, I drew it on my whiteboard, but I ultimately had to pass that to another team because I was working on the James Tyler Variax, because Spider Valve, when it came out, there was a 499 head and a 499 112. And we became 51% of the under 500 market at line 6.
I remember when those came out, and now I have this weird, it sounds weird to say it like this, but I have this weird nostalgic itch to have one. I've got a Spider 2 here, and I still plug it in, and I know it, like all the jokes are about the Insane channel and everything, which is a lot of fun. But I think we think, we've came so far with modeling, and we really have. Yeah. But if you look at the bones of what the Spider gave us, wow, this thing is like just try to go in without all the preconceived notions, without all the jokes, without all of the memories you have, and just plug into one. Like, this, I see why this was so revolutionary back in the day. And now I'm like, I kind of want a Spider Valve, even though I don't need one at all.
Yeah,
I kind of want one just because.
Yeah. Oh, no, I get it. I have a couple friends that still use theirs for recordings. Like Doug Bossy that he was in Whitesnake for a minute. He was in a band called Mustard Seeds with the Bissonette brothers. But since you brought it up, I got to tell a fun story since you have a Spider 2. So so when they said, hey, Rich, your next product is going to be, we're going to put a bunch of artist presets in Spider 2, clean up the UI and make it look nice and have a little menu, and we're going to call it Spider 3. And I was like, so I grabbed a Spider 2 and I was like, hey guys, the clean is nice, really nice. And you put really a little effects on it. And Insane, what you just said is like a ton of fun, like more gain than you could ever use unless you're Dino from Fear Factory, in which case you do records. Because the great thing about Insane is it's like, if you have a tube amp with that much gain, it doesn't go
nope.
It doesn't do on off because it's sag and it's just like it can't do that thing. And in fact, when we did all of these improvements on HD 500, I got one to Dino and he was like, I got to have the Insane channel fixed. This is not working for me. He didn't want the sag. So that's when I think we went and we made it where you can kill the sag, because they want it to just be massive distortion on and off.
Yeah,
so,
very compressed and tight. And,
So I said to the team, I said, look, the mid-gain stuff, though, if I'm going to get presets from 311 and, I mean, there's so many bands that I went to. I said, if I'm going to get presets from these guys, then we need to improve this. And they were like, look, we don't have the budget to remodel for Spider 3, but if you can work with Jeff Slingloff in sound design, he ultimately went on to Boss and did the Katana amps and their floorboards and stuff. If you can work with him and improve it, feel free. You just go set a meeting with him. And I had worked with his employees on the bass amp, Chris Candelaria and Ross. Oh man, good friend on the bass amp. But so I get down to Jeff's, and he sadly passed away during COVID. When I was at his memorial, I realized what a giving guy he was. He's total rocker, total killer guitar player. But when I got to his office, he could have been like, who's this new guy? I'm the one who did the sounds for Pod, for the original AX212 and all that stuff. And he's going to come in here and tell me, because we have Spider 2 was really popular. It wasn't number 1 yet, but it was really popular and they were making money. So he could have had an attitude, but he had a guitar on he knew I was an engineer. He's like, here's the tools. This is what that does. This is what this does. Let's have fun. And I started dinking around. He goes, oh, what are you doing? Oh, do this. And I said, oh, and let's do that. And he was like, this sounds great. Oh my gosh, this is a blast. And I said, great, but I trust me and I trust you, but can I bring in some guys? And I brought in Tim Pierce, Bobby Hartree that I talk about all the time.
Tim's amazing.
Yeah. Bobby Hartree I met in Tim I met before I knew he was Tim Pierce. He was playing with an artist named M. Spyro, which is Mark Spyro, who sadly passed recently. But he was playing at the Troubadour under M. Spyro. And the reason I knew him is because he was going to be writing with that band Peace Child I was talking about. And he wrote like the big Julian Lennon hit or whatnot. So, but Bobby, I met in Jim's garage in like 1987, and we've done so many things together. It's just, the list is endless, and he's an incredible guitar player along the lines of Landau. I mean, he's, that type of player, and, should be way more well known, but it was those two. And then Matt Scannell from Vertical, I had them all come over and we messed around some more. And then when the prototypes came, that's when I went to Tim's to show it to him and saw his pedal board that led to M13. And Tim plugged in and he was like, Rich, I could put an SM57 on this right now and record. So it's pretty amazing that Jeff was that giving. But anyway, back to M5, I had to let that go to somebody else because the spider valve works so well. We were like, hey, Variax guts are great, but people didn't bond with the guitar. So I'm like, let's do the same thing. Let's get with a builder, let them design the guitar, and we'll put the guts in. So I was talking to Tom Anderson and Tyler, and I was going to reach out to Don Grosh. I never got a chance to, but I was talking to Sadowski. Excuse me.
Hey, you don't got to apologize for that. I've been muting my mic this whole time with my stupid flu that people are going to listen to this podcast and be like, Blake's been sick for like 4 weeks. It's really only a week. That's just how many podcasts I've recorded while sick.
That's funny.
But yeah.
And there's a couple other people I was going to reach out to. So I did a list and I sent it over to our employees. We had our own, units in Europe and Japan. And when I sent it over to Europe, I got a call or an email. I can't remember, like 5 minutes later. And Keith Carnell was like, you know James Tyler? And I'm like, I used to work for him. And he's like, okay, we don't need to talk anymore. That's what we got to do. And it was them really. Like I love Jim and I love Tom Anderson. Oh, sorry.
Oh, hey, it's a working office. These things happen.
I guarantee it's spam too.
Oh, of course.
You've reached Tyler Guitars. We are busy in the shop, so you can leave your
I think there's a do not disturb I can throw on.
I kind of like the realness. People are going to experience what it's really like in the office.
I said that when I did my thing with Dan Huff. I was like, when me and Dan were doing it, and he reached for his phone and whatnot.
This is for Rich. Hey, Rich, Brian Sutherland. I talked to you yesterday.
Oh, that's funny. I'll call this guy back. So when I was with Dan, it was like he reached for something, and I said, "Dan, we're leaving this all in," because I'm like so tired of like sort of corporate videos where the guy's looking off to the left. This is the most amazing guitar that's ever been made. It has loud pickups and a fast neck. It looks like acting, and I'm just like, that's not who we are in this industry. We're literally big kids playing with toys and making kids for other big kids and actual kids and having a blast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you probably can't hear that guy leaving a message right now, right?
Oh, I can.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right.
This is a long message. He's really giving you a lot of details.
Oh, there he goes.
All right. Bye.
Could you hear any of what he was saying?
Not really.
Okay, good.
I heard, okay, bye.
I think it was a good message because that would be a drag if I was doing this podcast and it was like, man, your guitar is broken. Which
sounded like it was a positive vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did the James Tyler Variax. Now, I did that, I moved into marketing, and I was actually starting to do what I would do with all my products with artists, but for all the product managers. And at that point, all through my Line 6 career, I was also mixing. And at that point for broadcast with my guitar player from my first band, he was a video editor who had done 9 Inch Nails and Katy Perry and on and on. But during that time at Line 6, I would go and I mixed the Who, Quadrophenia, One Night Only Thing, Maroon 5, Muse, Widespread Panic. I mean, tons of stuff. And I started saying no to mix work I shouldn't say no to. And I thought, you know what? I think I need to give this a go. In 2012, I decided to be a full-time mix engineer. What?
Okay.
Yeah. So well after the crash and burn, but I moved in with Karlstrom, my buddy who did Alice in Chains and stuff. And he had the
quick pause real quick.
Yeah,
I have a question. I'm trying to get the timelines in my brain right. Were you at Line 6 at the same time as Terry Burton?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Terry worked on the bass amp with me. And
Okay.
then left to start Strymon and then ultimately Maris.
Yes. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Maris, we've become good friends over the years.
Yeah.
And they support the show and everything. And
Yeah.
I love the Maris folks.
Well-
and I love the Maris stuff. So I was just trying to see
Yeah.
if that timeline was in my brain correctly.
So Terry worked on the bass amp with me, and then Angelo Mazzucco was key to the M13, and he ported over Verbzilla, so we had a quality reverb in M13 because it wasn't on a Shark chip, so it was a Motorola chip, and he discovered some stuff that was we found a bug in Octoverb, which is that sort of crystal echoey sound, and we fixed that, and in the course of fixing that, he called me to his office one day, and he's like, "Dude, listen to this," and it was particle verb. And it was like,
oh, cool.
And it was like, ha! But Angelo, man, both those guys are two of my favorite guys ever. I mean,
They're incredible.
I
love them.
I got to work there. I think it's all great, and what they're doing now is great. But I just feel like I got there where they were just on a tear, and I jumped onto the sled. And then between then and 2012, it was just, man, we put out so many products, and there's so much energy, and it was just a blast. And, Yamaha's done good for my friends that are still there, and, but it's definitely a bigger corporation, and they move at a different pace. But we were just like, but you want to hear about me almost quitting my first day?
Hey, Rocky.
What's up, Vincent?
Did you hear about the latest?
Latest what?
The latest drop from Maris. It's totally insane.
No, tell me more.
Maris just released Enzo X.
What's that?
Enzo X is a supernova expansion from the original Enzo into the highest quality and most flexible studio synthesizer ever created in a pedal format.
Whoa!
Enzo X combines 5 synth types, 5 drives, 3 reverbs, and 5 modulations. It also includes a full 2.5 second stereo delay, all in one pedal.
That sounds hard to use.
It's not. The UI is from the same family as the Mercury X and the LVX. It's super easy to dive in and see exactly what you are tweaking in real time.
Oh, I see. It's right there on the screen.
Yep.
Is it just for guitars, though?
Nope. You can plug almost anything into the Enzo X, including your MIDI controller.
That sounds incredible. Where do I get it?
You can pick up Enzo X online at maris.us or at any of their fine retailers across the globe.
Did you just say across the globe?
They know what I meant.
Wait, are we getting paid for this?
I'm still waiting on that cash money from last time.
He better at least give us pizza for dinner.
I'm not giving him his Enzo X back until he does.
For more information, make sure you check out maris.us, and apparently I have to go order a pizza. How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
Yeah, of course I do. Yes.
Well, so let me come back to that in a sec because that's a fun story. So my whole story. So I left to Mix Records. I moved in with Karlstrom. He had all the killer outboard gear, Summit gear, all that stuff. Just Google him and you'll see the massive amount of gear plus the SSL. So if we had clients that could afford it, we would record it through all that stuff and then mix on the SSL. But we would convince clients with a smaller budget, record it well, spend your money here. I'll mix in the box through some tube gear and for much lower mix price. And you'll get a better product than if you try to record at home and think you can mix it on, fix it on an SSL, which, when you know that doesn't work. But when you don't know, you think it does. You think the magic's in the board. No way. Chris Lord-Alge mixes and Bob Clearmountain mixed the crap out of stuff because of the way it's recorded. And obviously they know what they're doing. The SSL does a thing, but it does not fix bad recordings,
No, it does not.
So I was doing that and that was going great. And then sadly, my buddy passed away from an old-fashioned heart attack. So I moved my studio to my house and Obamacare was kicking in. So I was like, man, I need a part-time gig. And a full-time gig with Gibson and KRK landed in my lap. And I was like, man, I don't want a full-time job. So I went to the interview in jeans and a t-shirt, which ended up working against me. They loved it. And I told them to their face that I didn't know KRK was still around. And they all looked at me like, why would this guy say that in a job interview? And I said, look, guys, I'm your target customer. I'm literally the semi-pro mix engineer. And I was mixing at that point on Baby Gentle X 1029s for like 15 years. And I said to, I called Joe Barisi and Dave Jordan and friends of mine and said, what should I look at for monitors? I want to up my game. I was doing it full time and nobody told me to check out KRK. So I said to the team that was there, I said, so is that my problem or your problem?
Mm-hmm.
And they loved that. All their faces changed and they were like, oh yeah, that is our problem. So I said, I'm going to figure out why. And so I went to work for them. I did the V Series 4 and got like all the artists back, like Dave Way and Dave Pensato and Manny Marquin is using the little guys and a bunch of cats. Mark Stent, Spike Stent. And I did that for 5 years and went through the bankruptcy with Gibson, which was super interesting to watch from the inside. And it was so professional and clean and very interesting. It was worth my time there to watch how that all worked. Mm-hmm. And ultimately they moved KRK to Nashville and I have 5 grandkids here. So I was like, I can't go. So I was on to my next thing and almost went to work for Two Notes, the torpedo stuff, and hit it off with the whole team, honestly, Jeremy and the owner, Guillaume, but they really needed a sales guy and they needed somebody that could shred. I can play guitar enough to show you, but I'm a bass player. But they got a killer guy, Justin Bryant, that just killer. But I hit it off with the owner, so he flew me to France, and I helped launch the Captor X. And then I got back here, and I was going to my audio lunches. I was mixing again. I got a gig doing Disney and Marvel special features.
Cool.
I had to go through police background checks and got the gig, and then met with a buddy of mine 2 days before COVID shut down to get in the union. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess I'll get my hours up and I'll be in the union. I guess I'm mixing again. And then COVID, all the television stuff stopped. I mixed a big church from Houston remotely. They would send me tracks. I would send them to them. And then Jim Tyler texted me and he said, hey, can you help me, invoice some guitars and wire some pickguards? Came back, saw he had really good QuickBooks records. I'm like, Jim, what do you want to do? Because if you retire, you're the brand, Mm-hmm. And so I said, I'm George Fullerton of Tyler Guitars. And even in our industry, a lot of people don't know George just by name, or they might think and then you say G&L and they're like, oh yeah, George and Leo. And oh yeah, from Fender. And
mm-hmm.
That's me. Mm-hmm. I'm never going to be as famous as Jim, but people know me for what I've done. And they knew it was Jim and me in his garage. So I put out an email to all the dealers and distributors, and it was like because Jim stopped taking orders. He was kind of like just getting ready to mothball it. And so
really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think COVID was like a last straw. He wasn't like adamant about it, but I think it was just, he's 70 or 69 at that point. I think he was just like, enough's enough. So I said, let me build a team and let me make it where you can come and go as you please. And I did that in short order with a guy named Andy Hicks and a couple other key people. And he's now a master builder at Fender. And then brought in some other people like Gil Vasquez and Ed Lang. They've worked for multiple companies. So if you're watching this, just pause, go back and look up Gil Vasquez and Ed Lang. And of course, Tucker, who does all the finishing, has been here since Jim was on Sepulveda. And so I helped him ultimately sell the business to Wild West Guitars, which is a whole other story. And they've been incredible. Like the owner of Wild West is just an amazing guy, Chinese guy who made his money doing large sound systems in China, like Beijing opening Olympics was his audio. And he's just a fan of our industry. I call him the Chinese Norman, like Norman's Rare Guitars.
Yeah.
Because he knows everybody and he buys and sells, and he's just a fan of our industry. And a lot of companies, when stuff changes, ownership changes, it changes. And a lot of times it's not for good or bad, but the people that are there just, it's not what I signed up for. It's been great. Like, he's been amazing. And I helped Jim sell it. And then Jim got a lung transplant, and Jim was working for me. It was hilarious. Like, people would call and say, yeah. And we would laugh about it. He would come in here and sit right over there, and he'd go, okay, well, what do you need me to do? Because I didn't have him doing anything day to day, because he could come and go as he pleased. So I couldn't have him, setting up guitars every week, or he'd help if need be. But at that point, he pretty much wasn't touching a guitar. So I had him doing repairs and restoration stuff, which he loved. That's how he got started. And we'll tell his story in a second, because it's the more important story, honestly. So I went from Jim would do 5 guitars a week and had 5 employees. I'm doing 16 guitars a week and I have 22 employees, and I'm having a blast. We brought in the China line, which we could talk about. That's just been, I was so worried about it, but it's been so cool beyond my expectations. It's been great. So we'll just stop there. That's my whole story. So real quick, fun story about quitting Line 6, because I didn't understand what a product manager's gig was, and it was kind of, if you Google product manager, it was kind of a thing that happened because of technology. That's where they really started talking about product managers in the role that they ultimately become. You're basically the CEO of the product, the owner of the product. So my first day, didn't know what that was. I got hired. I did all my paperwork. The very next day, Daryl, the guy who hired me, said, by the way, I'm not going to be in those meetings with you tomorrow. I'm out of town. So just go in there with a pad. And if you don't know, just say, I don't know, and I'll get back to you. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting there, and across from me is Michelle Doidick, who founded the company with Marcus Ryle. And should I tell the real quick where Line 6 came from story?
Yeah, sure. Because I'm actually not familiar.
So,
they've been so ubiquitous for me my whole life.
Yeah.
Basically.
So Marcus Ryle and Michel Doidic, and he's a French guy. So Michel Doidic. Marcus and Michel started together at Oberheim. They did the OB8 and the Matrix 16 and a bunch of those products.
I didn't know that. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Well, and Marcus is now back there helping them relaunch all that stuff, which is great.
Cool.
And then they wanted to have their own company, so they started a company called Fast Forward Designs, and they were the team, the building of people like Jeff Slingloff and others. James Santiago, I think, worked there at that point. And gosh, I mean, just tons of cats have gone through Line 6, but they developed the ADAT and the SR16, HR16 drum machine. The SR16 drum machine still sells. They did an update after 16 years, and it's still selling now another 15 years later. It's just a great little drum machine. But it was mainly for Alesis, keyboards, all this stuff. Well, then they wanted to have their own company. So they were not going to bite the hand that feeds. So they were like, let's make a modeling amp. If it works, we have our own product. If it doesn't, we haven't pissed off, people who pay our bills.
Right.
So they were developing this amp and buying old Marshalls and rocking out. And like, why would a keyboard company be buying Marshalls and rocking out? So anytime somebody came to the front who they didn't want to know what they were working on or see, how secretive Line 6 is. It's like, hello, Helix Stadium. I have multiple friends there that I would go visit all the time, and I had no inkling they were even working on anything. That's how we were like that. We were just like, never talk about it. It was like, I don't. My wife wouldn't care, but I think we were told to not even tell our wives or kids or anybody. So, anyways, anytime somebody would come to the front door that didn't belong at Fast Forward, somebody would get on the horn, and the project manager was a guy named Eric Von Plienes, and we just called him Eric VP. So they would get, and I wasn't there at this point. I just know the story, but I worked with Eric at Line 6. So they would get there was 5 phone lines. So they would get on the intercom, Eric VP on line 6, Eric VP line 6. And that meant hide everything. Yeah. Cover everything up, hide it. So when they came to naming the new company, when they did the AX212, they thought Ryle amps, no, Doidic amps, and they didn't like anything. And then Susan Wolf is Marcus's wife, and she said, why don't we call it Line 6?
I love that. That's
I love
amazing.
it too, because when I was a kid, when I got a pod, I thought Line 6 was like 6 strings on a guitar.
Yeah, I didn't have any idea what it was. I was like, that's what cool. It is, I guess. Yeah. It sounds cool.
So back to, I'm sitting across from the guy who founded the company, and at that point I knew who he was. The kid to my right worked at Boeing. He was the mechanical engineer, and there was 2 guys from Rocketdyne on like mechanical and structural. I forget. There's 2 guys that worked at Rocketdyne, and then Dale Wagler, who's still there, who's one of their main design guy, who designed a lot of the shapes and the things that you've seen over the years. And they got schematics out, and they're talking and this and that transistor and bombs and all this stuff. And I'm like, I faked my way into this job. I was like, I have to tell Daryl tomorrow. This was a Thursday. I remember specifically because I started on a Wednesday. Thursday, I'm in that meeting. Friday, I was going to come in and say, Daryl, I hope I didn't waste anybody's time. I feel bad, but I am in over my head, and this is not for me. I have no idea what's happening. And so I'm thinking that in the meeting. And then toward the end, Michelle says to Mike St. Clair he works for Apple now. I think he's still at Apple. He was the mechanical engineer, and said, well, did you build the 115 bass amp with a port? We were just, they were at that point developing just the cabinet to go with the head, to become a combo. And he said, yeah, I got it built up. And Michelle was like, well, does it sound good? And he said, I play a little bass. Sounds good to me, I think. And then Michelle looks at me and he goes, well, that's your job. Go listen to it and tell us if it sounds good.
Nice.
Yeah, except that I'm following Mike down to sound design, and I'm still thinking I'm quitting tomorrow because my job surely can't be to tell the guy who used to work for Boeing that what he's doing is good, because obviously it's going to be amazing. He worked at Boeing. What the heck? This is insane. And I get there and I plugged in, and they had like basically a bass pod into a power amp going into this cabinet, and it was horrible.
Ooh.
It was so horrible that it wasn't even like me going, oh, I don't know, this could be better. It was something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And being a mix engineer, I put my head down by the port, and the port was out of phase with the speaker.
Ah.
So you had the speaker pushing one air, and the air coming off the back going out the port was out of phase. And I could feel it and sense it, and there was no low end. And Mike said, oh, well, what is that? And I said, well, in phase is when the waveforms look like this, and out of phase is when they're like this, and they collapse and you lose low end. And he said, oh, okay. And I put his head down there. I said, you feel that weird pressure? And he goes, yeah. So he goes to his office, comes back to my office like a half hour later, and he says, so the program to build the cabinet had a place for phase, but I didn't know what that meant. So I just left it blank.
That'll
and
do
I was
it.
like, now I know what my job is. And for those of you who don't know what a product manager is, if you've seen Tom Hanks in Big, he was the head. They made him the head of product development because he was a big kid playing with toys and understood the toys and how to actually practically use them. And then I realized, and then from there, obviously I had 7 years of wonderful years there. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, from my experience, working with a lot of engineers in a lot of different disciplines, but specifically on like the mechanical side, they just approach things from a different. I'm generalizing here, of course.
Yeah.
But they approach things from an engineering perspective, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this all makes sense on paper. Let's do it this way." And then you get in there to actually work with the thing, and you're like, "But why is the drain plug underneath the intake manifold? Like
Exactly.
that doesn't make any sense." Like, well, it made sense on paper because of X, Y, and Z, but if you're not actually using the thing on a regular basis, which they're not, and that's not their job.
Yeah.
Then
Nope.
these things get kind of overlooked, and you can be like, oh, that's dumb, but you got to think about, they're thinking about the clearances on the rods and
All
the
that.
pistons and
Yeah.
how the fluid flows through the block. I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you if you put the spark plug in the wrong place.
Exactly. No, that's a great analogy, because that's exactly it. I'm sure he was doing that cabinet and he had the bracing just right, and he knew how it was going to hold the speaker, and the port was going to look like this, and it was going to be that long. And he just one little thing where it was the practical side of it was like, oh, but man, and yeah, I have so many fun stories of, just things that where you have the practical experience and they don't. It really helps them do their job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. It really does. So, what is Jim's story? We keep hinting at it, but
yeah. So
I think that's rather crucial to this conversation.
Yeah, we tried so many times. People who are close to him call him the lovable curmudgeon. So if you've ever met him, just know he was lovable, not a curmudgeon. But he was very to himself and that kind of thing. Never wanted to take credit for stuff. Never cared about that. But I had a plan. After he had his lung transplant, I kept trying to get him to tell his story so we could write a book or whatever. And he's just not that guy. Doing what we're doing right now. I alluded to it when I was talking to Dan Huff, and I said, man, Jim should really be the one sitting here. And you can see me and Dan both pause, and we went, yeah, but he wouldn't be. And
Right.
Dan's like, yes, he was a man of few words. But what we had a plan to maybe sit in a room with him and just get him talking, like put some cameras up, maybe even put cloths over him and just start talking for 3 or 4 hours with just me and like Matt Scannell and my buddy Bobby and this guy, Mark Williams. who was my first dealer I ever dealt with at Tyler. Mark Williams, he was at a place called Venom and Music. I'm sure some people will be like, I remember Venom and Music. And just get him talking. So this is totally my recollection. And, this is not down on paper or anything, but it's a fun story to tell because it kind of dawned on me when I came back and Jim and I would talk about all these stories and I started piecing things together that I'd never really done because he would just sit here and we would just jaw, right? So he came out of high school, grew up in the Valley, San Fernando Valley, came out of high school and was a certified Fiat, BMW, and Mercedes mechanic and was working as a mechanic and tinkering with guitars because ultimately he wanted to be a rock star like any young kids in the 60s going into the 70s. And I went over to Norm's and Norm filled this part in. He came into Norman's Rare Guitars with an acoustic guitar he had fixed. And Norman was like, wow, this is really good work. Yeah. I mean, if you want to, work in the back and be my repair guy, let's do this, And so he worked for Norman, like I'm sure it was like a 1099 deal or whatever, where he was autonomous, he didn't work for Norman. He was there on campus. He would get guitars ready if somebody was getting ready to buy it, or when an old guitar would come in, he would tweak it and fix it up. Well, he started building a clientele, so he moved out and he was on his own. And I have ledgers and stuff that Jim was showing me where just his clients were, Robin Ford and Gary Richrath from REO Speedwagon and Bruce Springsteen and Prince and, on and on. And then ultimately, the session guys. And what happened was he would take a Strat and he would take the block, so you got the block and the strings on a Strat are down here and they go all the way through the block and then up over, right? Mm-hmm. Well, he would take that and put it in a vise and drill it all the way up to the plate. So there was no string, just like modern bridges are now, almost everything. Right. And this, of course, is before Floyd Rose, he was doing this. And then comes over the saddle, he would refret the guitar and crown everything perfectly and clean and taller frets and, for intonation. He would put in ivory nuts so that he could lube them up with like Vaseline and talcum powder and stuff. And then he would put little spacers under the tuners so he could get rid of the string trees and make a guitar stay in tune. And he started to get known as the guy who could make a guitar stay in tune. And, if you're a session guy and you're on a date with it's bad enough when it's just the band and just drummer, keys and whatever, but sometimes you're on an orchestra date and now a director's staring at you trying to get your guitar in tune. And it's time is money. Yep. So he started attracting all the session guys. Well, in the 70s, Steely Dan and now what we're all calling yacht rock was really starting to take off. And it was these clean, pristine recordings. And, so from a Strat was super annoying. Mm-hmm. And everybody was working on how can we get rid of the hum on single coils, because the sound of a single coil is not a humbucker. Like one thing that people don't realize is the humbucker in a Les Paul wasn't designed to be a humbucker to sound like a humbucker. Right. It was literally a humbucker. It was bucking the hum. So they put in a single coil. That's obnoxious. Put in another coil and put them on, wire them backwards. And now you have no hum. They weren't thinking, oh, this is a sound. Now you had two sounds, but it wasn't about that. It was bucking the hum. That's it. Oh, now it has a character and a sound of its own. Right. So at that point, this is, because that was in the 60s or whatever. Well, now in the 70s, they're figuring out how can we make the single coils quiet without changing the character of a single coil. So everybody was trying all kinds of stuff. And like one of the things that was being tried in the 70s was by a guy named James Demeter. Well, I'll just say Demeter now because Jim is James Tyler. So I'll say Tyler and Demeter. So Demeter had a noise canceling circuit, and he's told me the story. And again, this is just my sort of quickie recollection, and Demeter knows the whole story. But he had a noise canceling circuit with a preamp and a mid boost. And it was all one thing. And Jim didn't like what it did to the single coils on the noise canceling part, but he liked the preamp and what it did, giving you a buffered signal and opening up, the bandpass filter that a cable does to your tone. So that's where you get the glassy highs. The preamp in our guitars isn't turning on or boosting highs. It's just taking the bandpass just look up bandpass filter if this is too techy, but it just opens that up because it becomes a low impedance signal. So he liked what the preamp did, and he liked the mid boost to roll off the highs and boost. Really, it should be called a bass boost. It's down like 150. And so when you're soloing or up high, I think some Huff has been showing that in some videos, which is really fun because it makes so much more sense when you see a guy who can play go. And then I roll up this mid boost, and you hear that? Now the note's round. And so so the preamp was in. Then he was out at Seymour Duncan's, who was just another repair guy who was a friend of Jim's. And he was in a little unit, out in Santa Barbara, one unit. Him and his wife lived in the unit for a while.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's a super little, I wonder if this is pretty high def. Let me just see if I can show this picture real fast.
All right.
Yeah.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblissaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Is this something where you're going to edit and add stuff later if I sent you these pictures, or should I just try and show it?
If you got it quickly, let's see if we can show it. Yeah, it'd be fun.
Yeah.
You can also send me pictures. That's also cool. Oh, wow. Look at that.
That is the entirety of Seymour Duncan. Those are two walls on each side. And Jim took this picture because it was Jeff Beck's guitars. And you can see the
that's
arm
what's going
contour
on?
cut off. Yeah, so Seymour was working on those guitars.
Well, if you could send me that photo, that would be appreciated.
Yeah. It's around the internet too. But in the back, you'll see a green board.
Mm-hmm.
First off, right next to the guitar neck is the one pickup winder he had at that point.
Oh, I see it. Wow.
And then in the back wall was like pickups coming in, pickups ready to be worked on, and pickups ready to be picked up or something. And that was Seymour Duncan.
Yeah.
That was all, But again, he was just Seymour, and they were going to go to lunch. So Seymour's at the bathroom, and Jim's looking at all these pickup parts laying on his bench. And Seymour comes out of the bathroom, and Jim says, "Hey, Seymour, what if we put all tall magnets in the bottom plate of a single coil, and we push the top down halfway, and we put another top on, and we wind one coil one way and one the other? Would that be a hum canceling single coil?" And Seymour was like, "Yeah, that'll never work. Let's go eat." And without a doubt, Seymour might have been thinking stuff like that. Other people were, because that whole, I've realized one thing is, how we all talk about Landau and Lukather and the Picaros all going to the same high school, and the Valley in general being a hotbed for like musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was also this hotbed for like innovators on guitar, like Jim and Anderson was working at Schecter and Herschel Blankenship that was over there, and Aspen Pittman, and coming in the story is another guy named Dan Armstrong. And they were just all these young guys dinking around with guitars, just like Landau and all those young guys were like playing the guitars, because they all played too, and they all wanted to be rock stars. Tom Anderson was known as a killer guitar player, vocalist in bands all over Southern California.
I just looked over to see if I could reach my Dan Armstrong. It's a little too far away, but
just Google it. So
yeah.
So of course, Seymour obviously spurred on, I'm sure spurred on by Jim and others, worked it out and came out with hot stacks. And so Jim started putting hot stacks in guitars and humbuckers and stuff. And that opened up the door to do series parallel switches, because so like on a Strat, when you're in the in-between position, you're basically wiring two single coils in parallel. And because you can do it in series too, but it's in parallel. But now on an individual pickup, because it has two coils, you can do series and parallel.
Yeah.
And so Jim started doing series parallel for each pickup. Well, what if you have the preamp on and your bridge pickup is in parallel and the other two are in series? If you got to go do a lead, you're going to be screwed, know? Like, how do I get there? So he called a friend of his that lived with Aspen Pittman named Dan Armstrong. Hey, Dan, can you come over to the shop, and help me? I'm trying to figure out, I got to come up with a switch where I can go from where the switches are set to the lead to the bridge pickup in series. And that became the lead rhythm switch. And a lot of people relate to it like the blower switch or any number of other things people call it, that came more like in the late 80s. This was like in the 70s still. So that would be the setup for anything Tyler was modding that was in Coma, and obviously Dan's 64 and Huff's 64 for, I should say. I always try to say last name, so in case people are following along, they can Google it, especially young guys. Because sometimes us older folks, we forget that there's young guys going, who the heck's Dan Armstrong? Well, just Google all these names and be amazed. So all of that went into a guitar that Dan Smith built at Fender. And here, I'll show you. I'm sure you'll be able to see this in a photo, because it has this weird shape. And somebody posted it, and I couldn't believe it. It's the Billie Jean guitar. But if you look at that horn, can you see how it's kind of all rounded off, kind of
it's
weird?
It's all tapered.
Like a Tobias or something, a bass, right? So,
and that's a Fender, like an actual Fender?
Yeah, it's a Fender.
Interesting.
And I found out the reason that you can't ever find David Williams with a guitar with classic stacks and all the switches and the preamp and everything like he used on Billie Jean is because he didn't own the guitar. Andy Brower owned it, of Andy Brower Studio Rentals and that whole fame. So this guitar, it's hard to see because it's all blown out, even in the picture. Like it's not, because I'm trying to show you on here, but it was three classic stacks and the switches and the preamp. And David Williams, when he tracked Billie Jean and that record, I'm sure I bet you it's on all the tracks that he played on, but it's Billie Jean's the one that obviously stands out. You can really hear that ticka-down, ticka-down.
Mm-hmm.
He was so excited. He called Jim and was like, Jim, I just did this thing for Michael's new record, and it's all three pickups on, middle pickup in parallel with the preamp on, and we went direct into the board and then through a compressor, and that's it. And it was amazing.
A direct sound. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was kind of a shtick for a lot of that. People would do that with just a Strat,
Mm-hmm.
And here, I bet you can hear. We'll just do this. I'll put it up to my earpiece. I was over at a young guy's place showing him Dan Huff 64, and just for fun, even though it's hot stacks and a JB, I still did the all three pickups on.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were sitting next to his preamp and his rack gear. And I said, hey, let's plug in direct just like they did. And we did this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's the vibe.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's that thinned out, comb filtered thing. All of that went on Billie Jean on Thriller in 82, which means it was probably recorded in 81. And Jim had figured out all that stuff that went into that guitar and did that guitar and was already doing that for multiple people. And Jim was 30 years old.
Oh, wow. I think Billie Jean is, I might be forgetting a song here, but I'm pretty sure that it is my very favorite Michael Jackson song. It's such a great song.
Thriller, when I was in basic training I was in the National Guard and I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. Halfway through, we could take our money and go to the PX, which is the store. Mm-hmm. And I bought a Walkman, a Sony Walkman, and I bought 2 cassettes. I bought Def Leppard, Pyromania, and Michael Jackson Thriller.
Yeah.
And Michael, man, I mean, you now you hear it in documentaries all the time. He and Quincy were like, we're going to get R&B on rock stations. Mm-hmm. We're going to get Eddie Van Halen. We're going to have Steve Lukather play those rhythm parts, and we're going to get this stuff on pop radio. And genius. And I loved Rock With You, and I loved Off the Wall album too. I've loved Michael Jackson because I'm old, so I listen to ABC and all that stuff. One Bad Apple is the Osmonds. By the way, side note, if you haven't heard the Osmonds rock records, have you?
No.
Oh,
I've spent very little time with the Osmonds,
right?
To be honest. Yeah.
No, there's a guy who does YouTube things, and his caption that caught me said, "How that F, squigglies, did the Osmonds become my new favorite rock band?"
What?
So the album's called Crazy Horses. Everybody who's listening, if you love rock music, just go listen to the album, and it's really them playing. It's not one of these where, like the Jacksons, obviously they played on some stuff, but it was the Motown guys, not the Osmonds. They could actually play. You can find live clips of them doing Crazy Horses, but you go listen to it, and it sounds like Zeppelin, like John Bonham would bring Jason to see the Osmonds live. He loved them that much. They were a rock band.
My brain can't handle this right now. I'm so confused.
Because you just think of one bad apple can take the whole lot down.
Yeah. That's all I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So later, go check it out. I'll remind you.
I will. Thank you.
But I don't even know how I got because Jackson's. So I've always loved Michael Jackson. So yeah, all of that. So Jim did all of that. So by Thriller. Then he kept modding guitars, and it was everybody in the 80s had modded guitars. Dean Parks, Tim Pierce later, Steve Watson, who was a cat who was doing like all the TV themes like Hill Street Blues and all that, is a Tyler with the switching. It was a Telly. And at this point, Jim would take a guitar and strip it all the way down, refret it, put on a Floyd, put all new guts in, brand new pickguard, all this stuff, and build it back up. And he's like, you know what? If I get Bodies and Necks from Philip Kubicki, who had just left Fender and was doing Bodies and Necks, kind of like now people would relate it as being a business like Warmouth, where you can buy Bodies and Necks. Well, Kubicki was doing that. And then ultimately when Anderson left Schecter, Anderson was building Bodies and Necks and pickups for other builders. So, and Anderson comes up in the story literally right after this. So he was getting Kubicki Bodies and Necks. And in fact, I have a guitar. I'm going to do a thing on our Instagram showing where the serial number is pounded into the neck pocket of this Tyler. And that serial number looks just like the numbers that were pounded into the Kubicki Factor bases. You can tell it's the same serial number pounder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he would get Bodies and Necks and he wasn't thinking I'm going to build guitars. He was just like, that saves me the trouble of tearing it all the way down to build it back up. So he was building these guitars with nothing on the headstock. Who was I just hanging with? He brought, a guy named Ron Comey, who had the 11th Studio Elite ever made. But before he had his Studio Elite, actual Tyler with the Tyler headstock, he had this guitar Jim put together, and there's no name on the headstock because Jim didn't care about that. But people were like, dude, it looks weird. You got to put something up there. So he saw stationery from like a dentist or a lawyer or something, and it had the guy's name all the way down the side of the stationery. So Jim thought, wow, that's pretty cool. It kind of has an Art Deco look, like repeating columns or repeating arches in a building or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so he did that, just James Tyler's. And he was like off the end of a Strat headstock. And he goes, nah, that looks weird. And Steve Watson's Telly just had Tyler's down the Telly headstock. And he said, that looks weird. let me put a big Tyler in the middle. And he's like, okay, that looks cool. So that was what he would do. He would put that decal on these guitars that he was building. And then that started to gain traction. Like the Dan Huff Yellow Classic was one of those. He didn't want to sell that guitar at all. And Dan just begged him. He was in his shop at one point. And he was like, please sell me that. And he used it on Giant and stuff like that. But then Anderson had left Schecter's, so Tom had a Fadal and helped Jim design his headstock. So for those of you who have heard that it's, I'll censor it, that's my squigglies.
Yep.
And then some people think it's this, or that, or a sideways hand, or it's none of that. Of course I'm backwards. So, am I on the,
You're the correct way on the recording, so you're good.
Okay. So,
and for the audio people, he's holding his hand up.
Right.
Yeah.
So then for you guys, it would be this way. So on this, so if the headstock was facing you, he put a nub, and the nub was just to match the other side of the straight part of the headstock. So the guitar would hang straight. That's it.
Oh, that's all that is? Okay.
Yeah. Because in the olden days, we didn't have string swings and all those cool things I see behind you. Mm-hmm. We had like wire things in a pegboard, and they were just like that. And you put a telly in it, and it would be like, oh,
it goes hanging off of one of the tuning pegs, and
it's dangerous enough with string swing and all those companies. It's like it was nightmarish, So Jim put a nub, and then he just came right down the name, tucked it in, and came around. That's it. And then he dug the shape. I mean, he didn't do that and go, well, I guess this is all I can do with it. He liked it. So that's where the headstock came from, and not all that other weird stories that are out there. So this would have been 87 when I met him, and we moved to his garage, and we did the first 10 Tylers, and I'm sure this would show up. This is a fun picture. Just say, hey, send these to me.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So that middle guitar that's all kind of blown out was Chicago, built for a guy named Dwayne Bailey. I'll send you the picture because it's definitely better than it is there. I can't get it to do the lighting, but Dwayne didn't bond with it, so he sold it to Bill Champlin, who then used it in Chicago videos, and so it ended up everywhere. So I'm a young kid, and I want to show my dad a picture of what I do, and I took this picture, and then I was on a podcast with oh my gosh, just one of my good friends. Cut the part out where I'm like being an idiot. Session solos guy, John Tallman. He does the session solo stuff, and he was just getting started doing what we're doing now. His aspirations were to become you. And so I was showing him this picture, and because it's this weird zoomed in one, I zoomed in and I was like, wait a minute, what's that Jim burst right behind there?
Yeah, what is that?
In that era, I went, oh wait, that's Lukather's Puffy.
Oh,
his Tyler, because the first 10 Tylers, here's the list. I'll just show it to you. Oh, if you haven't seen Norman's Rare Guitars documentary,
I just watched it.
See it. Well, they show this picture of Eddie Van Halen with Norm.
Yes.
Right in between them is Jim Tyler.
Oh, cool. Oh, awesome.
That shot was taken with Jim's camera when he worked back then.
This is weird timing because I'm talking to the folks at Norm's right now to go down there and do this with Norm in person. So
that would be amazing.
It's a nice coincidence that all this is happening at the same time.
I love Norm. I barely met him over the years, but I feel totally connected to him because it's so connected to Jim getting started in this industry.
100%.
The bench that I show everybody that Jim built, he built right after he left Norman's, and it's been every guitar ever set up was set up there. So let's see if I can get this to not blow out. Of course not.
I can't really see. Oh, there we go. There we go.
So there's the first 10 Tylers. Tyler had one. Then a guy named Todd Sharp was playing for Rod Stewart and many others. Now he makes amps, Sharp amps. And then Rick Azum was playing for Pat Boone. Robin Ford, everybody knows. And then Jim had a guitar. Then Kevin Dukes was playing for Billy Joel. And in fact, if you Google Billy Joel ticked off in Russia kicking over a piano on YouTube, you can see that guitar. And then Bradshaw. And then
Bradshaw is Bradshaw.
Bob Bradshaw.
Okay. Yep. There we go. Okay.
Bob Bradshaw.
Lukather.
And the Lukather and Landau. And then the bottom one there is my guitar player, Masteller, and a guy named Giannichini. They both had number 10, and they were hand signed. So that's how long I've been working for Jim, because like right over here is Steubenhaus's bass. These are the first 10 basses, and I have number 9 bass.
That's so cool. Oh, yeah, look at that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's how long I've been with Jim. But when I was a kid, I didn't realize. One day I'd be telling the story about when the company started. It was Jim and me in his garage.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it was kind of, I would say, okay, and this is for young people that are watching, whatever gig that you get, do it with all your might, and whatever you're hired for, cool. But if they tell you to do something else or they need you to do something, just do it. You never know what you're learning. Like if I wouldn't have learned all that, I was good with numbers, but had I not learned that accounting stuff, I couldn't have with confidence said I can pay the bills at Fernandez. And I couldn't with confidence say I was the controller at Fernandez when I went to line 6. You know what I mean? And on. Because I would strip down wallpaper at Jim's place. But guess what I was doing when I was stripping wallpaper in his house? I was listening to Wyndham Hill, Michael Hedges and stuff. And I was like learning stuff. And he was telling me stuff and he put music on. And you know what I mean? It's like I could have had an attitude and been like, I didn't sign up for this, work in your garage,
right.
but it was in his garage that I met one of my best friends, Bobby Hartree, and I met Michael Anthony, because I think you probably know. Michael Anthony just talked about it in a video, and it's so great. He said, yeah, we did this cobbled together Jack Daniels bass, and then I went to this pro builder, and he says to his tech, oh my gosh, I've known his tech over the years, and I'm mind cramping right now. He says, who? Yeah, James Tyler. He built the first Jack Daniels actual production,
really
real bass.
Wow.
Yeah. And what's fun is find that the picture of Jim, just Google Jim Tyler, Michael Anthony, and I forget who's holding them, but they're holding 2 basses, the Jack Daniels bass, and then Jim built a Tabasco bottle bass at the same time. And it had it looked like a Tabasco bottle. And Michael Anthony started playing them both, and Tabasco, the company, sent a cease and desist to Van Halen.
You'd think you'd think they would be like, that's great advertising. Biggest band in the world at the time. What?
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah.
They probably thought they should be paying us for that.
Yeah. So that's when I met Jim, and then Jim kept working on. He was over where Schecter used to be, over on Sepulveda, and we did the James Tyler Variax, and he just kept a slow build of a great business. Where when I came, like it was really easy for him to sell because he had no partners, he had no debt. He did it. I realized when I started hiring people, he was like 5 employees, or 3 or 4 employees. And, and one day I said, he's a car guy too. So he owned a couple of different Corvettes, and he bought the latest Corvette, and he would always feel guilty about stuff like that. And I said, Jim, you worked your ass off. Yeah. And then I paused and I went, Jim, you worked 2 or 3 asses off, like multiple, how hard he went at it, building what he built, and so far, with him gone and everything, there's no slowdown. It's been great because I feel like if I can hang in here till I retire in 6 years, I can hand it off and it can just be an actual brand that will live on. And regardless of that, this is a fun story. I said 2 things to Jim that really kind of floored him. I said, 1, Jim, in 100 years, people may or may not know James Tyler. Who knows if James Tyler guitars will still be going, if people remember him, maybe. There's definitely a possibility. But I said, people will be listening to Billie Jean. And regardless if they know it or not, what you helped create that helped a guy do that on a record is going to be around until people aren't listening to music, because Thriller will be listened to. And he was kind of like, yeah, you think in 100 years? I go, Jim, we're listening to Beethoven.
Yeah.
They're going to be listening to Michael Jackson. Maybe not the Bullet Boys. They should be, because I love the Bullet Boys. Have you heard of the Bullet Boys?
No.
Yeah. Everybody listening, go listen to the Bullet Boys. They had a song called "Smooth Up In Ya," and Mick oh my gosh, Mick Sueda, the guitar player. I had lunch with him a couple years ago. Finally met him after all these years. He's playing a Les Paul, but on the record, Ted Templeman produced that band, and they were like in the Van Halen vein.
Mm-hmm.
He had brought all his Les Pauls over for Jim to work on, and he didn't have a guitar for pre-pro, and he said, "Can I borrow one of your guitars?" And he said, "Sure." And he took the guitar and plugged it in and played, and Ted Templeman looked at him and said, "Dude, you figure out what you got to do to make sure that guitar stays on this recording, because we need it." And so Smooth Up In You hear it and you go, "Oh yeah, that's not a Les Paul." And he said the bane of his existence is people coming up going, "Man, I can't get that tone that you're getting on with your Les Paul." And he goes, "Yeah, because it was a Tyler." and they were big kind of when Poison was out and Warrant and, that whole crew. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, fun story.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about this industry that sometimes I forget about, which sounds weird to say, but I find myself once in a while, because, we're like 10 and a half years old at this point, as far as our company goes.
Yeah.
And we've just been pushing so long, and trying to sell people on strings is rough.
Yeah. It's great strings though.
Thank you. Appreciate that. People don't like to switch. And so it's tough, but it's finally getting to kind of the breaking point where all right, I've heard about them enough, we'll give them a try type of thing. But once in a while, we have enough artists using our stuff now that, this is one of the great things about the industry too, is once in a while you get the opportunity to work with people you've been admiring for years. And and maybe even, in my case, some of the people that inspired me to get into all this stuff in the first place. But one of my favorite artists is a guy named Ben Nichols. He plays in a band called Lucero. He's main songwriter and everything. And I just had a realization, like, he just came out with another solo record, and his solo records are very stripped down, typically him and an acoustic guitar, and that's mostly it. And I was like, oh, we work with him now. Oh, that's our strings on the entire solo record of an artist that I just love. And so it was like, it slips by me sometimes that, we get to work with these people. Oh, and now I'm hearing it, and I'm going to hear it forever. And, most people may not know that, but it feels cool to me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. I've done a couple of smaller things that will live on, but it's exactly that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, wow, thousands of people hear that. They don't know what they're hearing, but that's okay.
Doesn't matter.
We're a little part of the equation. That's really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Rich, we've been going for a while, and we got to slide over and get some Patreon bonus action done. But I have 2 questions I ask everybody at the end of an episode. But before I do that, I want to give you the chance to take the floor, shout out anybody you want to shout out, plug anything you want to plug. You're listening to a few thousand people are listening to you right now, and you can tell them whatever you want.
Gosh, I mean, I'd say, I'm just so thankful in my life when I think about folks around me. Dan Huff becoming, not only a client, but now becoming a friend. I think about him and Landau, and Mike's with Fender now, but I've told Mike many times, I said, Mike, I'm nothing but thankful because of him and Jim, I have a career. It all came from Jim, and Bob Hartree and Daryl Smith and, it's, and Michelle Doidick. And I mean, it's just like, that'd be my shout out is people come up to me or they call the shop now and they can't believe they're talking to the guy in the videos. And what they don't understand is I'm a guy who can't believe that I got to stand on the shoulders of some giants. And that's a term, standing on the shoulders of giants. And when I say I never mean I see myself fully standing on Marcus Ryle's shoulders. It's like, to even be part of the club and to have been around these kinds of creative people, I just am nothing but, happy. So, nothing to really shout out because obviously we're Tyler Guitars. So that's why we're doing it. And, check out our guitars and history, and lots of guys doing a lot of great content. You can hear them that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. First of the 2 questions. First one.
Wait, I got to brace myself.
Yep. Get ready. What is your favorite Boss pedal?
Boss pedal. Wow. Well, I'm a bass player.
Sure.
Okay. In my travels and making the M13 and stuff, I always wanted to do multiple of the vibrato pedal. VB2, because every one of them was different. Like I was at Scannell's and he pulled 2 or 3 out from under this couch and we plugged them all in because, he was comparing to the one that was in M13 and he goes, see, but I love this one for this and this one for this. And I always thought it would be a great story to just model them all. And have multiple of the same pedal. Because same with the Tube Screamer. The one that Judge Trips liked ended up in the DM4. And what's the first thing you do? You pull up a Tube Screamer. Well, it's not everybody's favorite, but it was George's.
Right.
But the VB, man, that pedal is just so cool.
Yeah. VB2, it's a classic. Love that. All right, final question. What is your favorite kind of pizza?
Oh, that's easy. Pepperoni, light on the sauce. And I don't mean it's my favorite pizza. That is the only pizza I eat.
The only pizza you'll eat. Wow.
Yep. Brands. We have a Little Tony's in California. There's a place called Casa de Pizza. I do not like New York pizza. Sorry, everybody from New York.
What?
I've gone there and people are, you just didn't get the right pizza. You got to go down here and go down in the stairs. Go there. No. Whatever it is that they like, I definitely don't. Fold it and no.
Oh, man. I'm a big fan of the New York pizza. I actually went there as a total skeptic and was like, it's not going to be that good. And now I'm converted. I'm like, oh no, I'm a New York pizza guy.
You know what? I'm old. Maybe I got to try it again.
Well, if we ever find ourselves in New York City together, I've got a couple spots. We'll all right. You don't have to look for them. I'll take you there.
Okay, deal.
That'll be easier.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time. We'll slide over to Patreon, see what kind of nonsense we can stir up over there. But for Rich, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. Alrighty, folks, there you go. There's another episode in the can. And guess what? Rich and I talked for a very, very long time on Patreon. So if you want to get that peek behind the curtain, definitely this is the week to do it. This is the week to go ahead, maybe skip the Starbucks, maybe shell out $5 so you can get access to the ad-free feed and this rather lengthy Patreon extended episode with Rich. It's really, really good. There's a lot of fun that's going to happen over there. So come join us if you're so inclined. And if it's not in the cards for you, no worries. The best thing you can do to support this show is share it with a friend. Please share this podcast. It means the world to me that people do that still to this day. Over a decade later, this is crazy. Thank you so much to all of you out there who enable me to be able to do this. I'm going to keep cranking out as much content as I possibly can. I've got some stuff coming up that I'm really excited about, and I hope you'll stick around for it. Thank you all so much. Love you. Have yourself a good one.